Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session focuses on linguistic rights. I hope by the end of this session you would have an idea of the term and how, the concept is used in today's world. Well, when it comes to defining linguistic rights or language rights, I am going to share a definition with you that says linguistic rights are the human and civil rights concerning the individual and collective right to choose the language or languages for communication in a private or public atmosphere. Well, there are a couple of things that I want to point out. First, it is a human and civil right to choose a language or more than one languages. For what purpose? For private and public sphere where they can be used. Well, linguistic rights were first included as an international human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Before that, when human rights were talked about, linguistic rights of human beings were not made a part of that. Well, my dear students, across the globe, there is a predictable shift in the analysis of the form and the use of English language. If we go almost 2 to 3 decades back, you would realize that linguistic imperialism was very strong, and English and the English-speaking world who were using English as their mother tongue, as native language, they were at the center of this division of being developed in relation to the other nations as being underdeveloped or developing, who were using other languages. But if we look at now the 2 or 3 decades time, what we can notice is that the scene has changed. In fact, against the notion of linguistic imperialism of British and American English, as Philipson has asserted, the development of bilingualism in different countries, as well as the international language, English as an international language, where English is no more considered to be a kind of ownership of the British or the American people. Rather, it is considered to be a lingua franca that is to be used by everybody and that is equally owned by the whole of the world. This change in the notions has, changed the current situation, and this has given rise to, and has strengthened the idea of linguistic rights. Also, on the practical grounds, when we look at the, spread of English as per se, it has not been able to continue, as the pace was predicted before that. For example, the television news channel CNN has failed to reach a mass market and has had to produce different editions of new programs in different languages to reach out to masses, because, the predicted spread of its English, speaking or, those who understand English, that market could not spread that much. Alongside where English could not meet that prediction of, speeding up the process of, spreading, that was anticipated, alongside, the kind of awareness and the kind of acknowledgement of human linguistic rights, through different national and international circles, in different communities and on the international level. These two factors together have given importance to different languages that are spoken by different communities in the world. And in today's world, diversity of languages, multiplicity of languages, in multiple cultures, it's considered to be something very beneficial and something very positive. In fact, it was in 1996 that the Universal Declaration of Linguistic Rights was approved by 220 people from almost 90 states worldwide. In its Article 24, it states that all language communities have the right to decide to what extent their first language is to be used for or studied at all levels of their educational system. So, there is kind of constant acknowledgement all across the world, globally now, that communities and societies and states have the right to decide which language do they want to use for, the purposes of education, for their students, for their young learners in their cultures. However, in this context, we need to consider the relationship between language and culture. We also need to consider how far linguistic and cultural rights have permeated into educational systems, because ideally speaking of these rights is something else, practically bringing them on board is something different. Think of, for example, the situation of Pakistan. Still, the English stream of education has prestige and privilege attached to it. Still, there are issues of using regional languages, for learners, especially at the early levels in schools. So, when it comes to practical application, still there are a lot of troubles, there are a lot of problems. We also need to think from the linguistic rights point of view, if local and cultural, languages and regional languages or the national languages other than English, if they are promoted and they are brought into the government and education and business domains, what would be the impact on the future, especially in this, kind of globalized world where the national boundaries are blurring. In fact, the 2004 Human Development Report, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, that is generally called, this report was titled as Cultural Liberty in Today's Diverse World. This reminds us that the eradication of poverty and inequality from the world is possible, and it depends only on the successful building of culturally inclusive, diverse societies, the societies that allow, different people to live according to their cultures, according to their norms, to celebrate their cultures, and thus to celebrate their languages as well. Also, as I have earlier said, the perception of English has changed over the times, especially through the last couple of decades. Sometimes some linguists have gone to the extent of calling it a killer language because it has killed a lot of local languages. For example, Crystal says that every 2 weeks one language dies in the world, and lingua francas like English have played a very significant role in that. And many of the linguists have supported the view that linguistic imperialism was being exercised, and through certain organizations where, for example, British Council or World Bank or other organizations used English as a tool to do these processes of, generating imperialism. So, this concept of linguistic rights, stands against all these ideas. However, the 20th century has closed with concerns about all this, and when we look at the future, probably the consciousness with reference to language rights would increase, and, the sense of equality or the sense of, prestige would be attached to all the languages, irrespective of them being what we may call strong languages or weak languages, international languages or local languages.